Welcome back to Who Cares Anyway. For those of you that don't know, my name is Quentin Walker, and this is a podcast where I give my sports opinions. If you agree with me, it's cool. If you don't, cool. But at the end of the day, who cares anyway? This week, I want to talk about the NBA playoffs. Round one just wrapped up a couple days ago. We had some definitely surprising finishes that I'm going to talk about here. And then I want to touch on a couple of series for round two that I think that are on my radar and that I think should be on other people's radars. Um, that being said, before we get into it, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, share, ring the notification bell. I think that's all you have to do on YouTube. YouTube has become this massive insights and click thing. Do all those things. They let me know that I'm doing well. um, if you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, I appreciate you because it's definitely not. I don't want to say the preferred way, but you're not getting a visual. It's just me talking about sports for however long this episode comes out to be. Either way, still appreciative. Um, but let's get right into it. So I want to start with I got two. There are two sweeps that happened in the first round in the West that really just stood out to me. The first one being the Timberwolves sweeping the Phoenix Suns. This is the bigger one of the two because a lot of people going into not only the season but into the playoffs felt like the Suns could be a team that could make a deep run given their roster on paper and given their roster's playoff experience. And nobody really knew what the Timberwolves were gonna bring once the playoffs started. But man, did the Timberwolves come to play? Uh, and I'm gonna get into what really went well for the Timberwolves in a second, but I want to talk about the Suns. Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal. The Suns' big three. I'm gonna read out their combined stats over the series, just points, assists, and rebounds. On paper, not terrible, but you have to remember these are stats combined for three players and three of their biggest and not three of their biggest, but three of the biggest stars in the NBA in this postseason. Um, but combined, the three of them averaged 70.8 points a game, 13.8 assists a game, and 12.6 rebounds a game throughout the whole series. Mind you, it's a 4 game series, so but when you look at them individually, Devin Booker didn't have a terrible series. He actually had a decent series. I don't have the stats in front of me because not really who I wanted to touch on. Um, Kevin Durant had a pretty good series by all means. He averaged 26.8 points a game on 55% from the field and 41 from three. And I mean, that's what you expect Kevin Durant to do. You expect those numbers, and you expect that impact. Um, Bradley Beal, on the other hand, a lot of people are saying that the Suns made a mistake going in and trading for Bradley Beal and um, taking on that massive contract. A lot of people are saying that he's overvalued now uh, because he's just not the same player he was in Washington. But given his stats in this playoffs, and I'm going to read them here in a second. But given his stats in this playoffs, I don't know where I sit on him. I don't know what side of the fence I'm on. He's still a really good player, still a really a really prolific scorer. Has the ability to give you 20 to 25 a game if healthy. I just don't know that he fits with Phoenix. I think that's where I'm at on him. After seeing him average 16 and a half points a game and 4.5 assists. Um, the 16 and a half points a game, that's a couple points down from his regular season average. And when you get to the playoffs, you tend to have that happen with a lot of guys. They'll tend to drop a couple of points in average, unless they're like the best scorers in the league, like a Kevin Durant, like a Luka Doncic, like a Kyrie Irving, or if you're an anomaly, the anomaly that is Jamal Murray, playoff Jamal Murray. I don't know how he does it, but usually when you look at the best scorers in the league, they tend to either stay around their season average or jump up a few points, maybe 2 to 3 points. Like I said, unless you're Jamal Murray, where you jump up 8 points, which is crazy. But we'll get to him in a minute. Not a minute. We'll get to him later. Um, but Bradley Beal just it seems like the impact and what they thought they were going to get out of Bradley Beal wasn't there. And Minnesota's defense is great. Like and it wasn't just individual defense, it was team defense. Rudy Gobert just won Defensive Player of the Year as of was announced today, I believe, as of recording this. Um, but you there's got to be a point as a scorer where you got to be able to get to your spots and get your points. If Kevin Durant can do it, and if Devin Booker can kind of do it, then I feel like Bradley Beal should be able to do. I mean, I feel like I don't know. I feel like Bradley Beal isn't that far off scoring wise as a scorer from Devin Booker, but I mean, and just to look in a vacuum, looking at Game 4, their elimination game, Beal was shooting a 34.6 effective field goal percentage. And to elaborate on what an effective field goal percentage is it weights uh 3 pointers as it weights 3 pointers more, since 3 pointers are uh 1 more point than 2 pointers are. So obviously, but also the way I see it, it weights 3 pointers more heavily because of the fact that threes are generally a harder shot than a 2 pointer is. Now that can be argued with the way NBA offenses work now. They all work to go and get 3 pointers and get easy threes, and mid range shots are kind of seen as the harder shot to take now because of the congestion that happens from really free throw line down. But I think when you got a guy that's shooting 34%, and usually effective field goal percentage is 10 percentage points higher, 10 or so percentage points higher than the regular field goal percentage, but 34% is not great at all for a guy that's supposed to be a scorer, and a good one at that. Um, Also in game 4, he had 6 turnovers. He had a defensive rating of 142.4, and he ended up fouling out. So in an elimination game, you've got a guy that's supposed to be maybe not a tertiary scorer, but he's supposed to be one of your best players, and you want him on the court as much as possible. but he's not only when he's on the court not playing as well as he should be, and he ends up fouling out. So I just something's got to be done in Phoenix. I don't know that Bradley Beal is going to be the answer for the Suns going further going in long term. Um, and I've heard the discourse about they need an actual point guard and not just three scorers and let them kind of like how Brooklyn looked when they had KD, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. It could be argued Kyrie Irving is the actual point guard there, or James Harden is the actual point guard there, but that's an argument for a different time. But Phoenix doesn't have a real point guard. They traded that away when they traded away Chris Paul. So to get Bradley Beal. So you have these three guys that are just all right. I'll take the ball and maybe we'll run pick and roll, but more often than not, it's going to be an ISO and we're just going to figure it out from there. Um, I mean, and Devin Booker has he took a little bit of uh point guard skill. He learned a little bit of a point guard skill from Chris Paul, from the time with Chris Paul, but I don't think he's anywhere near where you want him to be as a playmaker and as a quote unquote point guard to say that he's going to be the point guard of your offense. But that the Suns will have to figure that out in the offseason. Definitely early trip home and sent home by possibly the best team in the Western Conference. And right now, the best player in these playoffs is Anthony Edwards. He's been outstanding through what 6 games now, as of today because round two has already started. But I don't want to talk about him because Anthony Edwards gets talked about enough. He it's exhaustive at this point. We've talked about it's been talked about his stellar play, the 30 to 40 point games and the impact and gravitas he has on the court. Talked about enough. I want to talk about his supporting cast. The other four starters of this Timberwolves team, Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels, and Mike Conley played played their roles well, really well. And like I said, the team defense was on point in this series. But the other four starters in this series averaged 60.4 points a game, 11.3 assists a game, and 29.6 rebounds a game. You add that to the fact that Anthony Edwards averaged, I think, 30 to 35 points in this series. I, how do you beat that? Like especially if you're the Suns and yeah, your top guys are averaging these numbers, but are averaging the numbers I talked about earlier, I listed off earlier. But if your role players and your other starters aren't producing, there is no way you're beating this team. There was no way you were going to beat this team. Um, specific and to focus specifics on, I feel like I'm all over the place, but I promise you, there's a point to this. There's there's a through line here. To focus on specifically Rudy Gobert, I want to focus on him. Like I said earlier, just won Defensive Player of the Year. Congratulations to him. But Rudy Gobert in this series defensively outstanding. Now people are gonna look at the box score stats and they're gonna look for, oh, how many blocks does he have? How many steals does he have? That's fine and all, but that doesn't denote how good of a defensive presence, how impactful his presence is on defense. This is he's really returning to the form of Rudy Gobert from the Utah Jazz when he won his first two DPOYs, his first three DPOYs. Um, in this series, he averaged He had a 104.6 defensive rating and a 13.3 player impact estimate. Uh, and the really what sticks out to me the most, the impact estimate is big, right? But I think his defensive rating is even bigger because you're holding. This is a very good offensive Suns team, and and Rudy Gobert as an individual is able, when he's on the court, to hold this Suns team to what would be in 100 across 100 possessions, 104 points. And if the Timberwolves are scoring 110 to 120 points a game, which they were in this series, it, any team would be hard pressed to win, let alone the Suns. But Rudy Gobert's defensive presence was amazing this series. He showed why he was deserving of another Defensive Player of the Year award. He showed why he's an elite defender, and it's not just about blocks. The guy alters so many shots. He forces drivers to think to second guess themselves as they're going to the basket because first off, you see a 7 foot behemoth standing in front of you. Your immediate thought is, all right, now I got to figure out how to get this either over him or around him. But in the back of your head, you know he's a good shot blocker, and he's an amazing shot alterer. So you're thinking, you're not only thinking how do I get this over or around him, but you're also thinking, man, I really hope he doesn't block this, which will make you hesitate because you're like, I don't want this to be blocked. But it wasn't just Rudy Gobert on the defensive end individually. It was also Jaden McDaniels, who drew the assignment of guarding Devin Booker throughout the entire series primarily. And Jaden McDaniels had a 108.1 defensive rating. And for a wing player, that's outstanding. You rarely see wing players, unless they are elite defenders, under 110, under 110 defensive rating. And for Jaden McDaniels to be able to do that against someone who's regarded as one of the best scorers in the NBA is a testament to how good Jaden McDaniels is defensively. And against Devin Booker, he held Devin Booker to 18 points total when guarding him throughout the series on 33.3% field goal percentage. Now, when you're looking at field goal percentage, really the benchmark for field goal percentage is usually between 42 to 50%. Um, and that's like that'll be your benchmark of efficiency. That would be a good shooting night for most guys. 50% being extremely good. Anything over 50 being excellent, phenomenal. But to hold one of the best scorers in the NBA to under 35% from the field and 18 points while guarding him, 8 of those 18 points coming from the free throw line. So realistically, he held him to 10 points from the field. Is just it's like I said, a testament to just how good Jaden McDaniels is defensively, and also goes to show just how rattled the Timberwolves had the Suns in the series. Uh, it just feels uncomfortable when you're playing against a good defensive team. And as a scorer, when you're trying to get to your shots and you got guys that are in your chest every single play, sticking with you on your hip it's hard to try and it's uncomfortable is the best way to put it. It's just an uncomfortable feeling. And it, Kevin Durant's one of those guys where it's hard to make him uncomfortable, not only because of his size, but just because of his shooting motion. He can shoot over pretty much anyone. And he's gotten to a point in his career where he's comfortable shooting wherever, whenever. And he's not gonna let people speed him up. He's gonna get to his shots and go at his own pace. But when you're able to make a guy like Devin Booker uncomfortable, who's liable to go off for 50, 60, 70 points, and you're able to make Bradley Beal uncomfortable, who's liable to go off for 30, 40, 50 points. That's really good defense. That's great defense. Possibly the best defense in the playoffs. And it's looking like it's starting to carry over into their series with Denver. We'll talk about that more after that series is over, though, which will be in a couple of weeks. Because I want to see if that defense holds up. Moving on to the other sweep in the West, the New Orleans Pelicans got swept by the Oklahoma City Thunder, and there's a lot going on in this series. Um, First off, I want to say I don't know how more people aren't talking about this Oklahoma City Thunder team. This is a team, they're the one seed in the West. They come in, play a Pelicans team who, granted, they're missing Zion Williamson, um, and that's a big blow. But even without Zion, they were still a good team. And they were pretty, I don't want to say hot, but before the play in, they were kind of on a roll. Um, Now, to finish my point, and then they come out and take this assignment, and they're stellar defensively as a team and individually, and they make this series look easy by all means. Um, and if going into round two, if they continue to play this type of defense against a Dallas Mavericks team who you have to contend with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, uh, how could you not be talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder as a possible team to come out of the Western Conference? I keep seeing and hearing all the conversation about Minnesota, being the team to make it out of the West and possibly going and winning the finals. But I think Oklahoma City is going to give them a run for their money, and we'll get back to that later. But focusing on this Pelicans and Thunder series. Like I said, Zion Williamson missed the entire series. Um, and that's definitely a huge blow. It's really disappointing, to be honest with you. Um, he had his healthiest season in 5 years. This season was the most games he's played in the season at 70 games. Um, and seeing him get hurt in that playing game with going down with the hamstring injury, it's heartbreaking. Because he's gotten this label as an injury prone player, but I feel like a lot of people don't understand that. First off, dude is 6'8", 300, almost, well, not maybe not 300 pounds, but like 6'8", 285. Like that he's a Mack truck. And when you have the athleticism that he has, that's a lot of pressure on your joints, a lot of pressure on your muscles, trying to explode and get that much weight and that size off the ground. And when you look at Zion's play style, he's taking a lot of hits as is. But like I said, he plays above the rim and trying to get that size and that size off the ground. That's a lot of pressure on your body to do so. You're asking a lot of your body. Not saying that his body can't hold up to it, but obviously it can't because he's down with another injury. This injury forces him to miss the most important time of the year for this Pelicans team. And missing him, your offense is just, you could see it even on paper. You really don't even have to watch the series. On paper, the Pelicans offense struggled mightily. And to look at it on an individual level, the player that I felt struggled the most for what he really is known for as an offensive player was Brandon Ingram. Uh, Brandon Ingram is easily one of the quietest, best scorers, if that makes sense. He's a really great scorer. Has a has an ability to give you about 20 to 25 a night. This year he was dealing with a few injuries. Going into the end of the season, he hyperextended his knee, and ever since that moment, he just was never able to get a rhythm going. Um, Even in the playing game, he looked off. He looked unable to get to his spots. It just looked like that knee was really bothering him. But going into the playoffs, you have to give it a go. And man, did Brandon Ingram struggle? 14.3 points a game on 34.5 on a 34.5% field goal percentage and 25% from three over the entire series. Like that just oh it just looks bad. But the other side to this is that he drew the best defender that the Thunder could throw at him in Lou Dort. And with Lou Dort defending him throughout the entire series in total, Brandon Ingram scored 28 points on 33.3 on a 33.3% field goal percentage and shot 40% from three. Now 40% from three is really good, but if I'm remembering correctly when I was looking at the stats, it wasn't a lot of threes. It was maybe about like five. So the volume isn't there from three, but from the field, he struggled and also had four turnovers. So you got a guy that should be able to produce offensively and help your team out offensively and maybe make up for the offensive hole that Zion leaves. But when you're drawing the best defender the other team has to throw at you, and that defender is Lou Dort, who over the last 4 years has become an elite defender and has made defense his calling card. Anytime the Thunder play a great offensive player, they say, "All right, Lou, go get him." And there was a quote. It'll be on the screen. There's a quote from Mark Dangle, the Thunder head coach, and somebody had asked him how he would handle Luka, how he would handle Luka Doncic in the round two series, and he said, "Just make sure Lou Dort is on time." And when you got a guy that you can just say that, that's one heck of a defender in the NBA. But it wasn't just a Lou Dort effort. Um, it was a full team effort for sure. I know for a fact Chet Holmgren had a defensive impact with his shot blocking ability and his shot altering ability, kind of like Rudy Gobert. Just Chet's a little on the leaner side, so he's not that paint anchor. He's not going to sit in the paint and just kind of be there to deter uh, uh, drives to the basket, but he has that ability. Jalen Williams is becoming a great wing defender for the Thunder team as well. And Shea with his length and his size at point guard can hold his own defensively. He's not an elite defender because that's just not his game, but he can hold his own. Um, and I want to focus on the elimination game, game 4. The Thunder in game 4, all 5 starters finished that game with under 100 defensive rating. Now, I talked about earlier when you got a wing player like Jaden McDaniels who is under 110 defensive rating, it's rare because wing players, unless you're an elite defender, wing players don't tend to not be in that realm of defensive rating in that 100 to 110 defensive rating. They tend to be 110 plus. But to have all 5 of your starters have an under 100 defensive rating, and then as a team have an 89.9 defensive rating. That, that's defensive prowess right there. I don't know how much further to explain that. And I like I said, I've been seeing the conversations about Minnesota and that Minnesota's the best defensive team. Minnesota's the best team in the West. Minnesota is gonna make it out of the West. The Thunder are right there. And I really, really want to see how this trends into round 2 and see what they do against honestly a better offensive team in Dallas and see if this defense holds up and if they can continue running the table like this defensively. Because if they can, they're gonna give Minnesota some fits in that conference finals. But that's for later. Um, and to go back to touch back on game 4, OKC as a team had a 50% effective field goal percentage, and to focus back on Lou Dort defending Brandon Ingram, he held Brandon Ingram to 4 points on an 18.2% field goal percentage in game 4. And if that isn't a testament to what this team is defensively, with Lou Dort as the, I don't want to say anchor, but the defensive linchpin, which I guess means the same thing. But he's their go-to defender. You need a guy to get a stop. That Lou Dort. You need to cool someone off on the other team. Send Lou Dort at him. Um, and then as a team throughout the series, this also adds to my point of how good the Thunder are defensively. As a team, the Thunder had a 93.5 defensive rating. So what I'm saying is that across 100 possessions in this series, the Thunder are holding the Pelicans to 93 points, give or take a couple of points. That's that that's unheard of in today's NBA. I don't even think there's a single team that averages under 105. Maybe the Pistons. Maybe the Pistons. That's a different story though. But this, like I said, this really just goes to show just how good the Thunder were defensively in this series and are defensively as a whole and have been all year. And I think that if they keep this defense up against Dallas, it's going to be hard to not talk about them. Obviously, you're going to have to talk about them because they're going to be in that Western Conference Finals. because if the defense keeps going like this, there's no way they're losing to Dallas. But I feel they should already be in that conversation with Minnesota for not only the best team in the West, but also the best defense, maybe in the playoffs this year. But time will tell. Um, moving on, one of the biggest storylines in this playoffs: the Los Angeles Lakers get bounced in 5 games by the defending champion Denver Nuggets. And from the outset, from the immediacy after the Lakers series, after the series was over, you had questions about whether or not LeBron is going to retire. You had people calling for Darvin Ham's job, and they got it. Darvin Ham is out as head coach now, which I think right call. I think Darvin Ham was just, I don't want to say incompetent as a coach, but some of the comments he would make about certain things just didn't line up with what I see, what I hear good coaches saying. And I'll make sure to pull those quotes and throw them on screen. But I think any coach coming in to coach a Lakers team, and you have no prior experience as a coach, but also you're coaching LeBron James, and that's all I have to say. You're coaching LeBron James. LeBron James is a coach in and of itself. If he could be the team's head coach and play at the same time, he would be. I mean, if he could be the team's head coach, GM, and play at the same time, he really would be. But coaching a team like that is hard enough as is. But coaching a team like the Lakers, with the way the Lakers is built, is hard enough as is. But coaching a team with LeBron James, who is the ultimate on-court coach, is even harder. So I'm not surprised that he got fired. And then also just throughout the series, the supporting cast for the Lakers just looked iffy. They look shaky. And granted, the series was definitely closer than it seemed to be. Um, you can look at the scores; they're within. I think all the games are within about 10 points, and 10 points in today's NBA because of the way the 3 point line works for offenses is not that hard to make up. Um, but it's just the idea that a LeBron-led team, granted playing against the defending champions and quite possibly the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic and the best playoff riser in the NBA in Jamal Murray, you question how successful this team can be going forward. That's a conversation for a different time, though. I want to focus on this series. Like I said, the series was a lot closer than it looked when the Lakers were down 3-0. A lot of those games were close. Every game in the series was close. Both teams really struggled from three. Denver shot 30% as a team from 3 point, and the Lakers shot 29% from three as a team. So neither team shot really well from three, so you don't have that going for you. And then for the Lakers, two guys who you're, I don't want to say relying on to provide to produce for you, but two guys that you're looking towards for a spark outside of Anthony Davis and LeBron just didn't do anything for most of the series. Or I'm not gonna say didn't do anything, but it was a struggle for the series. D'Angelo Russell averaged 14.2 points a game and 4.2 assists, shooting 38.4% from the field and 31.4% from three. Now, D'Angelo Russell to me, uh, his career path has been interesting to watch. As a scorer, production wise, I see him usually around that 15 to 20 point a game. Like he's not the kind of, he can at times, but he's not gonna average you 25 a game. He's just not that kind of scorer. But when you come into a series against a team in the Denver Nuggets that you've already struggled with during the season and in the past, but it feels, even though it's a round one series, it felt like a must win for this Lakers team. Not only to turn the narrative around, but to show that the Lakers are the real deal and the Lakers are who they say they are and who Lakers fans say they are. But with D'Lo kind of struggling through the series, Rui Hachimura also struggled in the series, shooting 7.8 points. Not shooting. He had he averaged 7.8 points a game on 39% from the field and 35% from three. Uh, it's hard to give the Lakers a pass. It's really hard, and I think Rui Rui and D'Lo, obviously, maybe not Rui being that fourth option or that other guy to give a spark outside of LeBron and Anthony Davis. That's usually D'Lo and Austin Reeves. But Rui, usually he'll have these spurts where he just shows up in the box score really well and shows up on the court really well. Um, and I just think this series was just a wash for the Lakers from the start. Uh, it looked rough. It looked real rough. But and I mean, it looked rough for both teams realistically. But I think the Lakers might have been a couple plays away from winning the series, which would have put them squarely in front of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I don't know that that's the position you want to be in right now. But I don't know, man. Looking at looking at the Lakers' offensive and defensive ratings, the Lakers had a 109.7 offensive rating and a 113.4 defensive rating, which really, like I said, underscores how close the series actually was compared to the narrative being spun that, oh, LeBron's about to get swept and then them going out in five. Uh, each game in this series was close, but each game in this series looked like a struggle for both of these teams. And then moving to talk about Denver a little bit, Jamal Murray, the hero of the Denver Nuggets, struggled from three. He struggled from the 3 point line. He shot only 29% from three. Um, throughout the series, and granted, yes, the entire team struggled, but when you got a guy that I'm not gonna say relying on to hit threes because that's usually Michael Porter Jr.'s role. But when you got a guy like Jamal Murray who's supposed to be your secondary scorer and you kind of are expecting him to be able to shoot from three and he can't even shoot 30% through the series, rough, rough. The bench struggled as well. As a whole, the bench only averaged 15 points a game on 42% from the field throughout the series. Now, granted, 42%, like I said earlier, is kind of that start of the benchmark of efficiency in the NBA. But when that's six other guys on your roster combined only averaging 15 points and shooting 42% from the field, it's a little iffy. And I don't know what was going on with the Nuggets bench. I Because last year that was one of their bright spots outside of Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, outside of their starting five, obviously outside of their starting five, but outside of what their starters were doing, their bench was coming along nicely last year for them. and also came along pretty well through the season. But this series, they just struggled to really get any production out of them. Granted, a lot of those guys aren't scorers per se, and usually they're on the court with Jokic or Jamal Murray, so they're not going to be the go-to scorer. But you still hope for just a little bit more production out of your bench, just a little bit. Um, and like I said, Jamal Murray was the hero of this series. Without Jamal Murray both hitting that shot to close out the series and hitting, was it two shots? I think it might have been one. I don't remember. It's been a wild 2 weeks, but uh, without Jamal Murray's heroics, this is like I said, this is a completely different series. The Lakers might be going to play possibly the best team in the West in the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the conversation might be different. The conversation might be, oh well, the Denver Nuggets ring was a fluke, and LeBron is still the best player in the league, and he's not. And the Timberwolves have a fight on their hands. But just to touch on this a little bit, seeing that the Timberwolves have completely stifled the Denver Nuggets through 2 games tells me that the Lakers would have been in the same exact position, and it probably would have been a lot worse. So I digress. Moving on to the last of my recap of the first round. I got 2 teams I want to talk about: the Milwaukee Bucks and the Philadelphia 76ers. Both of these teams limped their way out of the playoffs. Both dealing with injuries that really held them back throughout their series. Uh, let's start with the Bucks. Giannis missed the entire series due to a hamstring injury or a calf injury. Sorry. Um, so already from jump, the Bucks are missing their best player, both offensively and defensively, for the entire series. So that's already putting them behind the 8 ball. And then in their overtime loss to the Pacers, they lose Damian Lillard to an Achilles injury for the next 2 games, it turned out to be. So now not only are you missing your best player for the series, in games 4 and 5 you don't have your second best player and your offensive engine anymore. So the Bucks, this series was just uh I'm it was just hardship after hardship. Like I said, you lose Giannis for the entire series. You lose Dame for 2 games. Game 4 starts and Bobby Portis gets ejected immediately with maybe 5 minutes into the game. So that's another spark plug that you're down, and it just wasn't what what you want as a team if you're the Bucks. And on paper, the series, and as I was looking through it, trying to figure out why the Bucks really lost this series and what really set the Bucks up for failure. I couldn't find a single thing other than the fact that yes, you're missing Giannis, who was a big part of that offense and and the defensive anchor for that team. And then you lose Damian Lillard for 2 games, and he comes back in Game 6, and he's not at all efficient. Not at all efficient whatsoever. Um, and then you've got little things here and there like Chris Middleton's ankle injury that he was dealing with all series long, and then he re-injured. I think he either re-injured or injured his other ankle during the series. So it's just one of those things where anything that could go wrong for the Bucks went wrong. Is what I chalked it up to, because this series looked like a series that the Bucks could win even without Giannis. And the Pacers came to play, and I don't know how they did it, but they pulled it out. Uh, Tyrese Halliburton came up big as a playmaker for the Pacers for Indiana. Pascal Siakam for the first, I believe, 3 or 4 games came up big as a scorer for the Pacers. Uh, and like I said, Chris Middleton was not efficient at all for most of the games in the series, outside of maybe one or two. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Just looking at it on paper and watching a couple of those games, like the Bucks won Game 5 without Dame or Giannis, and they won it going away. They won it. I think if I'm remembering correctly, it was about a 20-point win, and so that just tells me that, okay, there's something here for this Bucks team, and they can piece together wins, but like I said, everything that could go wrong went wrong in this series. And for the Pacers, everything that could go right went right, I guess. Because Tyrese Halliburton, yeah, their best player, struggled. And I mean, really struggled. Like, I don't even want to give you the stats. I'll put it on the screen, but I'm not going to read them. Seriously struggled in this series shooting. Like, seriously. Both from three and from the field. Was terrible all series long as a shooter, like outside of one game. Um, and they were still able to pull this out even without him scoring well for them. Granted, his playmaking supplants that. Um, he there's a few games where he's got 12 plus assists. So his ability to do that is definitely helps. But but looking at it, especially that overtime win in Game 3, I this is a series that the Bucks could have had. Like, if the Lakers were a few plays away from winning their series, but the Bucks were definitely a few plays away from winning their series for sure. But it's not how it shook out. The Pacers move on. They take on the Knicks, and I'll talk about that series a little bit later. But I want to move on to the Sixers. And man, oh man, is Joel Embiid a free throw merchant or what? This dude averaged 13 free throws a game. He had a game where he had his 50-point game, and I believe it was game 4. He had 21 free throws attempted. I, that made me think prime James Harden. And then I went and looked at James Harden's playoff stats just to see what the most free throws he's ever averaged in a playoff run was. It was 11. Joel Embiid averaged 13 free throws in this series. Had multiple times over 13 free throws. The dude is a free throw merchant, and watching that series, bro. Whoa, seeing the calls he gets is just baffling. There are like half of his calls, and I really mean that. I really mean that. Half of the calls he gets aren't even fouls. It, it's just insane to me that we can just be okay with putting this man on the line 13 times a game. Crazy, absolutely crazy. That being said, he really didn't shoot well throughout the series. Uh, he obviously he shot well in game 3 when he scored 50 points. Shot well in that game. And shot okay in game 6, but games 1, 2, 4, and 5 terrible from the field. Like absolutely bad from the field. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was obvious that his knee was nowhere near 100%. It probably wasn't even close to 70%. He just, especially in games 1, 2, and 3, it just looked like it was really bothering him. He was struggling, especially late in games, struggling to keep his breath. He was bent over a lot. Uh, there were points where he was struggling to get back down the court, defensively or offensively. And you got to question whether or not it was worth it. Obviously, you got to give it a go if you can, but was it worth it? Because you're out of the playoffs in 6 games anyway, and Joel struggled mightily in 4 of those 6 games, and it was up to the rest of that team, the rest of the Sixers team, to pick up the slack. And the only one who really picked up the slack was Tyrese Maxey, but I don't think he picked up enough of the slack, and that's asking a lot of a guy who's just kind of really getting into this role of secondary scorer or offensive spark plug. The go-to guy when your go-to guy isn't in rhythm or isn't able to go. Um, like he could try as hard as he might, but it's not going to be enough when Joel is struggling to stay on the court or struggling to be present at times. And when you have a guy like Tobias Harris, who his contract is the biggest fleece in the NBA I have ever seen in my life. Like there's been a lot of talk of the Paul George trade from OKC to the Clippers and what the Thunder got back in return for Paul George. But man, can you believe that the Sixers decided to pay Tobias Harris $180 million over 5 years instead of retaining Jimmy Butler? Like, and just to really, mind you, this year was the last year in his contract. Just to really talk about it, Tobias Harris averaged 9 points a game, 7 rebounds, and shot 43% from the field and 33% from three. Right now, his shooting split's not terrible. Uh, I, from what I understand, Tobias Harris is supposed to be somewhat of a shooter, so I expect him to shoot a little better from three. But he also did not have the volume of shots. Like I think there was a lot of games where he only took about like 8 shots. So that explains the below average uh, points points per game, and definitely below what he usually averages. Um, but in an elimination game, the stat line makes me laugh. It's just in an elimination game, Tobias Harris he took 2 shots in that game, in game 6. Didn't make either of them. He had 3 assists and 4 rebounds in 29 minutes of play. This is what you paid this man to do? This is what you paid him to do. This is why you said, oh, we're gonna sign and trade Jimmy Butler to the Heat, and we're gonna keep Al Horford, uh, um, what's his name, Josh Richardson, and Tobias Harris, and then pay Tobias Harris $180 million over 5 years, so that you can get to this point in the playoffs and watch him average well below his average, both playoff and regular season, and absolutely disappear in an elimination game. It's just crazy to me. It's baffling. I don't understand how he managed to do it. I don't think he was worth the contract to begin with, but this just cemented it for me. He definitely wasn't worth it. If I was a Sixers GM, I'm keeping Jimmy Butler all the way. Like that's a closer. That's a guy that took a Heat team from the bottom of the Eastern Conference to the finals twice. Why would I not want him on my team? And before they moved on from Jimmy Butler in 2019, Jimmy Butler came up huge for the Sixers in that playoff run. Huge. I don't even think they're in the conference finals if they don't have Jimmy Butler on that roster. So it's just crazy to me. The Sixers have absolutely, and it feels like they've absolutely wasted Joel Embiid's prime. They took. I personally, I think they took too long to figure out what to do with Ben Simmons. I think acquiring Tobias Harris was a mistake altogether. Um, the James Harden fiasco. You got 1 year out of him, and he wasn't all that great. He was okay, I guess, but I don't know, man. The Sixers are just the Sixers. The Sixers are the Lakers of the East to me, and both of them being done by team. Well, let me not say that. Both of them being bounced in the first round is just poetic to me. But that's all I got on the first round. That's it. That's all I wanted to talk about on the first round. I feel like I kind of sped through it all um a little bit, but to give spark notes. Um, the Suns got swept, and it looks bad. It looks real bad, especially for what the Suns have on their roster and for what they're paying Bradley Beal. The Pelicans got swept, and it really just showed me how much Zion Williamson means to that team, and just how good of a defensive team the Oklahoma City Thunder is, like through and through. As a team too, not just individual players, just as a team, how good of a defensive team they are. Um, the Lakers got bounced in five by the defending champs. It was a lot closer than you're led to believe. Um, that one win by the Lakers was not a fluke by any means, and realistically, if Jamal Murray isn't on the court, this is a whole different narrative. This episode sounds completely different, and we're not talking about the Denver Nuggets going to play the Minnesota Timberwolves. We're talking about the Lakers and LeBron going to play Anthony Edwards in the Minnesota Timberwolves. And to round it out, the Bucks and Sixers just look sad. Realistically, you really feel for these teams. Well, maybe not Philly. I don't feel for Philly. I don't at all. I'm a New Yorker. I can't feel for Philly. It's just not in my blood to. But you feel for the Bucks a little bit. Um, the Bucks are missing their best player in Giannis for the entire series. Dame misses 2 games out of the series. They do win Game 5 without Dame, but it, they tried to do everything in their power to win this series, and they just couldn't. The Pacers came and fought hard. and were able to overcome some of their own struggles, namely Tyrese Halliburton. Um, and they came out and won the series. And then the Sixers, Joel was not at 100% at all, not at all. He looked it looked you could see it on his face, you could see it in his play. He was maybe 60-65%, if that. Tobias Harris is Tobias Harris is the biggest con man in the NBA. That's all I have to say on that. Tobias Harris is the biggest con man in the NBA. And Tyrese Maxey, I hope they get that man some help, some actual help, and not a half-legged Joel Embiid. But that's round one of the playoffs. Now I want to talk about round two a little bit, or just two series that I have on my radar. I may not be watching just because as a Warriors fan, yes, I know I said I'm a New Yorker. I'm not a Knicks fan anymore. As a Warriors fan, um, you know, not having your and I feel like this can be said about anybody and their favorite team. When your team isn't in it or when your team isn't playing, it's kind of hard to watch because you're kind of just like, why am I watching? Now, granted, I'm a basketball fan. I love basketball. I love watching basketball. I love watching good basketball. But playoff basketball right now has yet to look good to me. I've watched a few games here and there, and every game that I've watched has been okay. And maybe I'm not watching the right series. Maybe I should be watching the Knicks play the Sixers and Tyrese Maxey hitting two threes to send them into overtime. But uh, or maybe I should be watching the Orlando Magic play the Cleveland Cavaliers and watch Paolo Banchero absolutely come out as a star for that Magic team and prove that he's here. And as they took the Cavs to 7 games, but Uh, yeah, I don't know. It's just been a struggle to really watch. I've been paying attention, as you can tell. I've been paying attention. It's just been a struggle to watch. But for round two, the two series on my radar in round two are the OKC and Dallas series, and I talked about this a little bit earlier. I talked about this earlier. Um, the series will really be telling. It'll really show just how good OKC is. Or it'll really show just how good Luca is, Luca and Kyrie are. Either way, it's gonna show a lot about whoever wins the series. And if Oklahoma City comes out and wins this series, which I think they will, because honestly, I had the the Mavericks, Clippers, and Pelicans all around the same echelon of team. Not too good, but not too bad. They had their moments for sure. And if the Mavericks could knock out the Clippers and the Thunder handled the Pelicans easily, then there's no doubt in my mind that the Thunder are going to come in and handle the Mavs in the same fashion. And this Western Conference Finals is going to be is going to be a show. Is going to be must watch TV because these are honestly, and it's not just one of those years where this is these the two teams in the conference finals are the two teams that just so happen to make it here. No, these two teams in Minnesota and Oklahoma City are the two best teams in the Western Conference. And yeah, I know I'm already writing off Denver, and I'm already saying that Dallas isn't going to be able to hang with the Thunder. But don't be surprised when I'm right, and don't be surprised when the Western Conference Finals goes to 7 games and it's a dogfight between the Thunder and Timberwolves for 7 games. That being said, to talk about dogfights and to talk about a current dogfight. The Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks. I almost got my sports crossed there. That's crazy. The Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks. This series is gonna be good. It started off well. It started off really well, and it's gonna continue. This is a rehashing, a restoring of of the Knicks Pacers rivalry from the '90s. The Reggie Miller, Spike Lee choke choke in the playoffs, all of that stuff that I didn't grow up with. I didn't get to watch. I've only heard stories. I've only heard hearsay. But we're about to get Pacers Knicks Part 2, Pacers Knicks Redux, and it's gonna be a series to watch. It's definitely, if I said Minnesota and OKC was must see TV, and it will be. This series between the Pacers and Knicks is must see TV. These are two teams that play hard and fast, and they don't know how to quit. No matter what's going on, they do not know how to quit. And it showed in game one that if you look at that score, just the score alone, but if you watch that game, that's a hard fought game by both of those teams. And just to break it down on a more individual level, Jalen Brunson has been an absolute menace in these playoffs. Just outstanding. There's the stat, there's the 210 points across 5 games. Nobody's done it since Mike. But it's also the fact that I don't remember the last time I saw him score under 30 points. Like I don't recall, and I think the trend's gonna keep going. And both of these teams realistically are pretty scary to play. Now, granted, they're gonna have to get through the Boston Celtics, and the reason why I don't care about the Boston Celtics in this playoffs is because the Boston Celtics are the best team in the East. It's unquestioned. They're the best team in the East. Like and it's unfun. It's unfun to watch. It's unfun to talk about. Because unless you're a Celtics fan, just that Celtics team is really good, really good. And I don't think there's anyone in the East that can hang with them. They're not going to see a hurdle until the finals. That's when their real challenge is going to start, and it might shock you to see that the Celtics really struggle, or might really struggle in the finals against whoever they play, because they've they've coasted so far in the playoffs, and regardless of who comes out of the series between the Knicks and the Pacers, they're probably still going to coast. But I digress. This Pacers Knicks series is going to be fun to watch all throughout, and I hope I want it to go 6, 7 games, because I want to see these two teams go at it. And that's just going to be a hallmark of a good series. But that being said, that's all I got. That's it. Notes are done. Um, yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. Go follow me on Instagram. Instagram, same name. Who cares anyway? Podcast. Uh, go follow that Instagram. Talk sports there. Stuff that I talk about, stuff that I don't talk about on they're in episodes. And some other stuff. Some cool. Maybe not cool, but some more sports talk. Because who doesn't love talking sports? I know I do. But at the end of the day, if you follow it, you follow it. If you like this video, you like it. If you subscribe to this channel, you subscribe. But realistically, who cares anyway?